basically we're just on breaking full lambs down here, so we're splitting the hinds from the whole lamb. You just find one of the vertebrae that's just after the hip bones, the horizon bone, break right through it, nice and clean, no saws needed for this. Just over there we're just taking the Achilles tendons off. That's just so we can split the legs apart, otherwise we can't split down the middle. We take the little knuckle ends off the legs, one that's just so that they're a bit shorter so that they fit in pots better. There's also nothing on there you can eat. Put them to one side, we'll either give them to somebody for their dog or can be used for a soup or broth kind of thing. There we go, we're splitting the legs. You can have full legs of lamb just like those are over there, or generally we trim them down, and like I'm doing there, you just split the leg from the rump or the chump, and then you'll see me bone them out later. We use them for chump steaks or little chump roasts. Very often use them for our lamb hedgehogs in the counter as well when we've scored them up. Quick little saw through that bone, being very careful to just get through the bone and not saw into the meat, as we don't want to damage that tender bit. Straight through there with the knife. That's your nice little full leg. That's what we'll sell in the counter like that. There's not much more trimming required on one of those. We can bone and roll them for people if required. There we go, shank off. Just a quick crack through that knuckle. And then straight across that little bit of shin. Shanks are lovely in winter time. And then we're just splitting that leg into the two leg fillets. So you've got your top end of the leg fillet, which is a bit nicer. That's just on my right hand side over there. And that's got less bone in it. That's a really nice little roast for a couple of people. Scraping a little bone meal off there. We always got to scrape a bit of bone meal off. That's just in case. Just got to scrape that bit of bone meal off in case, just so that it doesn't show up in the counter, as it can make the meat go a bit dark. There we are, boning that rump out. Being very careful to only touch the bone and never put the knife into the meat. You don't want to be damaging that muscle at all, as you don't want a big slash through your steak. That's just trimming a bit of gristle off over there. There's a tiny little bit of gristle running off to the flank, and it's not the worst in the world, but you're better off having products like this perfect. You don't want any waste on them at all, so that the people that buy stuff out of our counter for the ease of things, they can just buy it and that's it, then finished. On to the next one. There we go, trimming off the next one. There's also a little bit of fat on there, which is actually quite nice to get into your trim, because if you can get a little bit of body fat into your trim, it makes your burgers nice and juicy. You don't want a burger that's overly fat, but you also don't want a burger where there's no fat in it at all. So that trim will just go to one side for our minty lamb burgers later on in the day. There you can see I'm cutting it into the little chump steaks, or rump steaks. They're absolutely lovely, those steaks, one of my favourite. Lots of the lads at work with us take them home. They'll mint them up and then just take them home as a quick frying steak, or you can even braise them off with some nice vegetables. Lots of our lamb, when I put it in lamb and mint and I take it home myself for dinner, I'll often put things like carrots and parsnips with it, just because that garden mint glaze really glazes those vegetables nicely. We're on to the loin and shoulders now. Straight off with that neck. You want to get that neck off first, because it makes everything awkward. If you're trying to bone your shoulders out with that neck on it, everything tries to run away from you because there's no flat edges on it and you can't balance anything. Straight off with those knuckles again on the end of the arms. Also to one side for somebody's dog. Over with that. I'm going to go straight down the sternum now. Now sternum, you can pull through it. It's actually just a cartilage, it's not a very hard bone. And I'm opening that up just so that I can count the ribs. You count to your fifth rib. There we go, you're counting with the end of my knife. Straight through the fifth rib on one side, and then I just look for it to follow straight through to the other side. Push the knife forward through that cartilage again. Now, lots and lots of people need to use the saw through here, but it's one of those things, when you break down quite a few of these, you get to know where you need to be. You could do what I did at the back here and split that without the saw. However, as the bones go higher up into the vertebrae along the back, you would end up cracking them, and that's no good for people, especially when you've got your loin and you're going to use it for chops, because you don't want any bits of bone chips in there, otherwise people will end up at the dentist's. Straight off with the breast of lamb, and there's a little bit of flank at the bottom there which you'll see me trim off later. That will also go down into our nice burgers or into grill sticks. Some people eat them, some people call them lamb leases. They can be fried off if you take the little membrane off them. There we are, pulling the kidneys out of the suet fat. Put the suet fat to one side as well. There's some people who'll ask us for the suet fat. I'm not too sure what people do with it, but would be nice to fry things in, but it's not something I've personally tried ever. Got to get those kidneys out. If you spend a little bit more time getting them out, there's a little membrane that's on them, and you can get that off like I have there while you're taking them off the first time. Lots of people will take them off and then go back and do the membrane, but when you've got a lot of work to get through, you need to be doing these things as you go, otherwise it'll take all day. There we are, trimming a bit of lean trim out of there. That bit of lean trim that I put to one side there, that'll be going into minced lamb. Now that's got no fat in it, just from the sides. They're like the skirt steaks of the lamb. Trimming that excess suet out there, just so that when you cook your lamb chops in a pan, or if you roast them off, you don't end up with a load of extra fat in the bottom of your pan. Getting that loin nice and clean there along the spine as well. Sometimes there's a little bit of windpipe still attached to there, and you want to get that off because that could be a bit chewy. This is nice lamb though as well. If you look along the loin, you can see you've got the little round eyes at the end of the loin there, and then you can see the fat running up. There I am, splitting the loins. Quick saw straight down the middle. Sometimes I turn it around. You might see me turn it around, or I might go straight through it. Got to be careful here, because if you go skew here, you can be straight into the loin and ruin it. If you get skew into that loin, you ruin all the chops. There we go, two nice loins to one side. I'm going to chop that neck up into a few neck chops, lovely for a Lancashire hot pot. Something like that. Stews, where I'm from in South Africa, we use them for something called the potjiekos. They're very nice. I wish sometimes that lambs had more necks on them. We very often get asked, well, how come you don't have any lamb neck? And it's just because at this time of year it sells so quickly as you go into winter. There we go. Nice neck chops. Right. Moving on to the breasts of lamb. Again, off with that little bit of flank, that's going to go straight into my minced lamb, nice and lean. Off with that bottom bit, or the lease. That's the bit that I was saying people fry off sometimes in different countries. Put that to one side, and I'll go through it later and decide what I'm using for what. Just score them up nice and quickly. That's just so that if people do want to roast them and then want to grill them at the end, just to get a bit of crisp onto them, that the skin doesn't all pull funny, that they can pull up. It's just like scoring a bit of pork belly, even though there's no skin on it. It still crisps up nicely, and lots of people refer to it as the skin of the lamb. Now we're going to just pull down straight down either side of the spine or columns. Then we're going to start at the breast, and we're going to work our way down the inside of the rib bones. Just start off carefully here, because there's a little bit of cartilage and your knife can cut right through it, so you just have to be steady as you go on with this.
Good morning.
Straight down that rib cage, being very careful not to nick the top of that shoulder, because you don't want to be cutting into the rib eye or the neck fillets of the lamb. There we go, we're by the neck fillets now. Straight off of that shoulder, nice and clean. And these shoulders now, we can bone them and roll them if we wanted to, but in this video I'm just going to keep them as whole shoulders. Used to sell loads and loads of whole shoulders on the bone, but as people have got less and less time nowadays, we're tending to roll most of our shoulders. We roll the shoulders in the shop because we use them for the lamb henries, our boneless lamb henry in the counter in the orange and mint sauce, but also just because it's easier. I for one, I bone that much stuff out here and I'm here that much. It makes it a lot easier when you go home and you've got something that's off the bone, already prepped, nice and trimmed up. It just makes everything a lot easier for whoever's cooking. Trimming a bit of excess fat off there, the bottom of the breast of the lamb. Don't always have to trim a load off here, but this lamb's got a little bit more cover on it, so you just want to get that excess fat off just so that you've not got too much fat going on. Also, straight over to the burgers. I will trim some extra fat out of that trimmings when I go through it again later, just to make sure it is nice and lean. There we go. Going to split the shoulder straight in half. That's going to be your leg end or your bottom end of your shoulder, and then you're going to have your fillet end of the shoulder. That's just to my right hand side again. Lovely piece of meat that. You can see that where I've hit the bone right on the edge of the knuckle joint. That just goes down to the shoulder blade, and then I'm just pulling out a piece called the paddywhack, which is just a little sinew, yellow sinew. You only get them in the necks of animals, but it's something you do definitely want to get out. That is good for stews and broths to thicken things like that, but it is incredibly chewy if you try and eat that. It's like eating old leather. You just got to nick the end and then you can pull it out from there usually. There we go, all pulled out. I'm chucking that to one side because that's gonna end up going to somebody for their dog or be collected by the person that collects our scraps. Always wiping the block with my hand. I know it looks a bit funny, but you have to get rid of all the little bone chips. You get rid of the bone chips from when you're sawing, get rid of the bone chips from when you're using the cleaver, because you do not want any bone chips on any of our products. People will be cracking their teeth with them, so there has to be care taken with that all the time. Now those are coming off, that's the breast bones. They can be stripped up and we'll sell them as minty lamb ribs. I'm just cracking through there because the bottom ends of them, where the cartilage is, I'll clean them up later and just take the trim off them. They won't be going for anything, or they won't be meaty enough. Straight through those lamb ribs. Nice for on a barbecue in summer. Not got loads of meat on them, but nice and tasty. Cracking through those other bits down the bottom there. They can be put into a hot pot or a stew. Just battling a little bit with that cartilage there. Sometimes it's a bit harder than others if you just don't quite hit your knife in the right spot, but that goes through eventually. There we go. Another one. There we go, and the knife's still sharp after all of that. Amazing. Put that over to the back table. Got to keep the block clear when you're doing anything. If you ever bone anything out at home or try break a lamb down or anything, keep your block clear, keep your working space clear. That's the biggest thing that I've learnt off Alan whilst working with Alan. You have to keep the job clean. As you can see behind me, the shop is very, very clean. We spend a lot of time on cleaning. Here I'm just cleaning the bones, taking all the excess meat off. Very important to do this. Lots of butchers say, oh, I don't have time to clean the bones, leave the meat on the bones, but at the end of the day that animal has died for us to eat, so we do want to be doing it justice, taking all the meat off it, using every part of it we can do. But at the same time, it is money, so if I don't get it off I will be wasting money, and that's not something we want to be doing either. Just got to take a little bit of care here as well. That's why we wear the chainmail doing things like this. It's very easy when you're working with a small light piece of meat like this, trimming small bits off that you cut yourself, and that's why some butchers say it's not worthwhile, because you're doing the things that doesn't make you a lot of money and you can cut yourself. So just get that protective gear on and there's nothing to worry about. Underneath my apron in this video as well, I do have a chainmail apron on. You'll see Phil using that often in his breakdown videos. He does do a lot of the bigger carcass breakdowns, and it's very important to be wearing that chainmail underneath your apron. There's actually a nice little bit of meat in there that I'm just getting out now. It just runs underneath the front of the neck. Quite a big piece actually. You want to be getting that out because that's nice in burgers. In beef it's that big that you can get it out, but stew out of it actually. Straight down in between the ribs. Taking care here to get every last little bit out. You don't get mountains of meat off this, but for the few seconds it takes, it's worthwhile doing. It's satisfactory as well. One of my favourite bits of the job, when everything's all clean and tidy at the end of it. There we go, having a bit of morning conversation with Scott as we go there. There we go, nice and clean, finished with that. Straight over to the burger pile. Actually had a really nice lamb display on the day that we finished this, because I got all that straight into the counter, trade the chops straight up. Nice bit of lamb out that day to sell. Getting those bones out of the way again. I've obviously just spotted something else on that shoulder that I might have missed. A little bit of excess fat or something. Probably a gland because I've thrown it off to my scraps pile. There we are, cutting chops. Just got that loin, get the steak knife out, get cut down. We cut one chop out of every bone, traditional style, fold that little bit of loin over. I go from one side to the other just to make sure that I get all my chops even. I don't want to be ending with a door wedge at the end. It's nothing worse than getting a door wedge as a chop. There we go, just splitting those last little bits that the edge of the knife missed. Get the cleaver out now. Taking care here again to chop it with as few chops as possible. Realistically you want to go through with one chop on every chop. That's also just to minimize bone meal or bone chips. Again, no dentist fees involved. Those are lovely little chops. Just going to get trayed up and go into the counter. These are my favourite ones now that we're taking off the little loin chops. Loin chops are basically the T-bone of the lamb. People refer to them very often as the cutlet chops. I've often even got people coming down and just saying to me, oh, I want some of those meatier lamb chops, because they see them as meatier because they don't have that long bone in them. I don't think there's particularly more meat on them, but having that little bit of fillet on like the T-bones does mean that they will eat really well. They will be very soft, and it is from the sirloin end. Then the chops that you can see that are still on the block now, they're the rib end chops, so they've got ribeye inside them and then run down onto the breast. The ones that are on the block now as well, if need be, we could French those chops off, do little lamb noisette chops, but generally in the shop we just sell them full. I don't see the point in taking the meat off them. Personally, I like eating lamb chops, and you don't want lamb chops that don't have enough meat on them. There's this other bit of loin now that's just still on the block, and we're going to turn that into a rack of lamb, and then I'll leave the other side of the loin whole. There we go, scraping any bone meal off again, just make sure it's nice and free of that. We're counting to 6 ribs here. Generally people want 6 ribs on a rack. There is 7 ribs, but if you split onto the 7th rib, it's just a bit of an odd number. People don't generally need 7 ribs. Can always get extra off another rack of lamb if people want 8 ribs, then we'll generally do two little racks. Straight down the front there, this is where I'm going to French it off, but first I'm just going to take that little bit of cartilage out, which is the back of the shoulder blade. Got to get that out, a bit chewy. Not something that's going to be a problem really if you are eating it and it is in there. It's good practice to get it taken out. Less stuff for the customer to have to do. Straight up and down all of these, making sure to get all the meat off. You want to get the meat off clean on a rack of lamb. just because if it's not off clean, when you cook it, it is going to burn onto those bones and it doesn't look very nice. So you must get these bones clean when you're doing this. You'll see me go to the other side now, and I just break the little bit of membrane that's on the back of the bone. As you can see there, I break it and then I scrape it. Scrape down the inside and then the outside of each and every bone, making sure to get that little bit of membrane right off the end of each bone. I was trying to do it so that you could see it at first, but obviously a bit of an awkward position for me, so we're facing the other way now. But you can see my knife going in and out and in and out. There we go, membranes off the back of each bone. Some people spend a lot of time on this, making them super clean, but that is clean enough. That's more than clean. Nice tidy job of that. Get all my bits up again, straight into my burgers. Don't want to be wasting anything. Generally want to score up your rack of lamb as well afterwards. What we're doing here is we're just cracking through the ribs. Going to pull that bottom bone off there. That's because you don't want that bottom bone off, because they're all connected to each other. So now once I've cracked through this and taken that bone off, when that's roasted off, anyone can just split down between the bones. There's no bones to crash into with your knife at home when you're trying to carve it. So makes the job a lot easier for the customer when they get home. Off with that. Down at the end here, you've got a little bit of that paddywhack or that yellow sinew that we were on about earlier. I've just nicked that off because you don't want that on it. Score it up again just so that the fat crisps up nicely, moves apart from each other and doesn't pull your joint into an odd shape when roasting. There we go. Cleaning those bones a bit then, I must have missed a bit. I'm a bit of a perfectionist, I can't leave it alone until it's right. Fantastic, and there you've got it, full lamb breakdown. Thank you very much, bye bye. So basically we've broken our whole lamb down now, and we've got all our bones. That's everything all cleaned off, there's no waste on them. All our trimmings from everything's gone into our pile. That'll go into our lamb burgers and our lamb grill sticks. We've then got our chomps of lamb, which came from the bottom of the leg there, like rump steaks. So you've got your very nice soft steaks like rump steaks. We've got your full chomps of lamb. We use them in the shop for hedgehogs, which is a very nice thing we do in orange and mint sauce, and they're great for like a quick easy roast midweek. Then we've got our nice neck chops. They do fantastic for your Lancashire hot pots or your stews in winter time. We've then got your breasts of lamb, which we've scored all up in case you want to roast them or grill them off, but they can also be slow cooked or chopped up into stews. We then move on to your kidneys. They came out of your loins, nice lovely fresh kidneys, good for your steak and kidney. Can go with beef steak, can go with a bit of diced lamb. We've then got your legs of lamb, that's your full leg with the shank on still, bone in. We can either now bone that out for diced lamb to go with some kidney for a bit of stew in winter, or people can just roast that off as a full joint, or we can bone it and roll it as a full boned and rolled joint for people. We've then got your shank and your two leg fillets, your bottom end leg fillet, which has your Heisen bone in it, or we've got your top end leg fillet, which was where your shank was. That's a lovely one because it's not got a lot of bone in it and you get a lot of meat for your money. We then move on to your bones. Now these bones, they can either be put into meaty ribs or used in stocks or hot pots, things like that, just to give a bit of flavour. We've then got your shoulders. We've got your lower end or your shank end of the shoulder. That's a very nice roast joint for on the weekend. If it's slow cooked, it will fall off the bone and you'll be able to get some nice bits and pieces out of it. Otherwise, that can be boned out and rolled as well, or that's generally chopped into lamb henries. You go across there, take your bottom end of your shank off, and then split the rest of it into 4 pieces for your henries. Generally, if we do henries, we leave some ribs on the back there as well for you. And then you've got my favourite, the fillet end of the neck. So that's got your neck fillet in it, which lots of people use. Jamie Oliver uses it a lot in his recipes. And then we've got your full side or your full shoulder, which I'm just going to keep whole in case a customer wants a full shoulder for roasting this weekend. We've then got your loin chops, which are like your mini T-bones. Got essentially your sirloin of lamb there and your fillet of lamb. We never pull your fillet of lamb out because they're that small, but they make an excellent eating little chop. Many people like those. We've then got your rib chops. They came with your shoulder side, so that's where you get your noisette chops and things like that if you trimmed them a bit more. Then moving on, I've just got a piece of piece of lamb loin there, and that is where I'd get some more loin chops from, but I'm going to keep that in one piece just in case the customer wants me to cut some thicker ones. Then we've done this lovely little 6-rib rack of lamb there, scored it all across the top so it'll crisp up nicely into squares and it'll look beautiful. All trimmed at the bottom there, no bone on that, and we've trimmed your paddy whack out the back there, so that will eat beautiful. Or that can be chopped down the middle for noisette chops if you want a fancy dish. And that's everything.